Since childhood, we've all heard the story of Prophet Noah, peace be upon him, how a massive flood with towering waves wiped out nearly all life on Earth. But what many of us don't know is just how strange and mysterious that era truly was. It was a time when people were seen descending from the skies. Magic wasn't just folklore, but a living reality, and mysterious portals would open before people's eyes. In fact, some ancient traditions suggest that the Great Flood itself came through such portals. It sounds bizarre, otherworldly, and strangely beautiful, but there are sources that support these claims. And that's what we're going to explore in this and the next few episodes. This is The Story of the Man, and you're watching its third episode. This episode isn't just about why the Great Flood had to happen. It's about how idol worship truly began, who introduced it, how it spread, and most importantly, who the so-called gods of these idol worshippers really are. Before we begin, let's take a quick recap of what we've covered so far. We started with the story of Prophet Adam, peace be upon him, his early days on Earth, and the lives of his descendants, all the way to the 6th generation. It was in this generation that Prophet Idris, peace be upon him, was born, a man whom Allah raised alive to the 4th heaven. Imam Tabari writes that the grandfather of Idris, peace be upon him, waged war against the army of Satan, and he won that war. But after his death, evil slowly began to take root among humanity. During the lifetime of Jared, who was Idris's father, things took a dark turn. Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, mentions a curious event. 200 men descended from the mountains and mingled with the people of Qabil's lineage. These men, with their arrival, unleashed corruption that changed the course of human history. This event is not only found in Islamic tradition, but also mentioned in ancient texts across various cultures. The Book of the Cave of Treasures, an early Syriac Christian text, also tells of men descending from the highlands for the sake of women. The Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch go even further, stating that 200 beings came down and became the very source of the great evil that nearly annihilated mankind. Although the Book of Enoch refers to those 200 beings as angels, in truth, they were far from it. They were not angels, they were demons in disguise. There is no possibility that such corruption could come from angels, who are by their very nature obedient to the commands of Allah. The scale of corruption they brought to earth makes it clear they weren't ordinary men. These beings had power. They possessed advanced knowledge of metals and how to forge weapons, of medicine and healing, of the stars and the secrets of the skies. They understood astrology, biology, and even the mysteries of the unseen. According to the Book of Enoch, these 200 demons took human women as wives and began to teach them secret knowledge, the kind that was never meant for mankind. They taught them magic, how to read the stars for dark purposes, and many other things that opened the gates of corruption. But they didn't stop there. They had children with these women, monstrous offspring known in ancient texts as the Nephilim, or more plainly, giants. Some traditions claim these giants stood over 100 meters tall, although the exact height is debated. What's more certain is that they were unnatural. According to some accounts, these 200 demons altered the genetics of humans, giving rise to many different types of giants. I'll come to this part later in the video again. These giants brought about even more ruin. Driven by insatiable hunger and strength, they devoured everything: livestock, birds, sea creatures, and even turned on mankind. The earth was plunged into a state of chaos and terror. It was in this dark and terrifying time that Prophet Idris, peace be upon him, rose to guide the people. He warned them. He called them back to the truth. But the corruption was too deep, the evil too widespread. So those who spread corruption were not just misguided humans. They were demon-possessed beings, giants, and idol worshippers who had completely turned away from the path of their Lord. So we must understand, the Great Flood wasn't sent merely to punish corrupt people. It was sent to cleanse the earth, to wipe away the evil that had taken root since the time of Jared, flourished during Idris's era, and reached its peak during the time of Prophet Nuh, peace be upon him. Prophet Nuh spent nearly 900 years calling people to the path of Allah, trying to save them from the corruption they had embraced. But when the majority persisted in worshipping idols, when the giants roamed freely, when magic and darkness ruled the earth, Allah the Almighty sent the Great Flood. It was not just a punishment, it was a reset. Now, let's take a look at the evidence for these 200 supernatural beings across ancient civilizations. Surprisingly, they appear in the myths and records of nearly every major culture in human history. And yes, they are the very same so-called gods that idol worshippers still worship today. In the early 19th century, European explorers and scholars began excavating the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. At that time, the region was under the control of the Ottoman Empire, which granted limited permission for archaeological work. Among these early explorers was Austin Henry Layard, a British archaeologist who led excavations at the ancient Assyrian cities of Nimrud and Nineveh, both located in northern Iraq. His goal was to uncover remnants of the mighty Assyrian and Babylonian empires, often guided by clues found in the Bible. Then, in 1849, while digging in Nineveh, Layard's team stumbled upon the ruins of a massive palace buried beneath centuries of sand. What they had discovered was no ordinary structure. It was the legendary library of Ashurbanipal, the last great king of Assyria. Inside were thousands of cuneiform tablets, many of them broken and scorched, remnants of the great fire that consumed the city around 612 BCE when it fell to invading armies. Among the texts recovered were the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest known literary works, which includes stories of giants and a great flood, Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth, the Era Epic and Bit Mizrahi. In total, over 30,000 tablets were shipped to London, where they remain preserved in the British Museum today. When scholars began translating the cuneiform tablets recovered from Mesopotamia, one of the most fascinating revelations was the story of beings called the Anunnaki. These beings were described as the gods of ancient Mesopotamia. The term Anunnaki is of Sumerian origin, possibly meaning those of royal blood, or those who came down from heaven. In Sumerian mythology, the Anunnaki were said to be the children of the sky god, An, and the earth goddess, Kai. Remember these names, An and Ki, because they hold deep significance. They form the foundation of much of the ancient world's idol worship and later systems of polytheism. The Anunnaki were not just distant deities. They were portrayed as heavenly beings who resided in the skies and acted as watchers over the earth. According to the tablets, they descended to the earth, bringing with them power and knowledge, particularly about nature, agriculture, the stars, and magic. One particularly strange account comes from the Babylonian creation epic known as the Enuma Elish. In it, the Anunnaki are said to have grown tired of maintaining the world themselves. So one of them, Enki, proposed a solution to create a new species that would serve the gods and carry out their work. According to this myth, Enki formed humans by mixing clay with the blood of a slain Anunnaki. In other words, humans were created as a hybrid, genetically engineered to be subservient to the gods. To me, this narrative is clearly a distortion, an ancient fabrication. As we discuss the story of the Anunnaki, there's another strange and often debated tale linked to them, one known as the ancient astronaut theory. This theory gained popularity largely due to the work of Zecharia Sitchin, who claimed to have translated Sumerian tablets. According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki weren't gods or divine beings. They were extraterrestrials from a distant planet called Nibiru. He claimed they came to Earth to mine gold, and to do the dirty work, they genetically engineered humans as a labor force. Now let me be clear, this story is complete science fiction. Major academic institutions like Oxford and Yale have thoroughly rejected these interpretations. The linguistic and historical flaws in Sitchin's translations are well documented. Honestly, I wasn't planning to bring this up, but I thought a little fun detour wouldn't hurt. That said, let's return to the actual ancient sources. According to the original Sumerian tablets, the Anunnaki were heavenly beings. They lived in the skies, what the texts call the heavens, and came down to earth with immense power and knowledge. Their role and characteristics line up strikingly well with the concept of the Watchers, those supernatural beings who descended to earth and became involved in human affairs, as described in the Book of Enoch. But it gets even more interesting. The tablets also mention that one of the Anunnaki, Enki, created a group of beings known as the Apkallu, also called the Seven Sages. And this is important. These Apkallu were described as pre-flood beings, created to guide humanity. Their mission? To teach the foundations of civilization, astronomy, agriculture, medicine, architecture, writing, and even rituals to ward off evil spirits. They were not just teachers, they were culture bringers. When we look at the ancient carvings of these Apkallu, they're clearly hybrid beings. Some are shown as fish-cloaked men with scales and fins. Others have eagle heads, powerful wings, and clawed hands. Some even appear as human-headed winged creatures, majestic and terrifying at the same time. So what does this tell us? If you recall the story of the Watchers from the Book of Enoch, they didn't just take human women. They also had unnatural relations with animals. As a result, strange hybrid offspring were born. Giants, monsters, and beings that were neither fully human nor fully animal. The Apkallu's appearance and origins mirror this account almost exactly. These Anunnaki, or as some traditions would call them, the Watchers, didn't stop at mixing their own DNA with humans. According to ancient accounts, they went further and tampered with the DNA of animals, creating hybrid species, part human, part beast. These hybrids weren't just experiments. They were used as slaves, serving the so-called gods, bringing them food, drink, and performing daily tasks. You can actually see depictions of this in ancient Babylonian reliefs, like the one on your screen right now. In essence, these Sumerian tales of the Anunnaki and Apkallu sound eerily similar to the Watchers and their offspring. Pre-flood beings, supernatural power, forbidden knowledge, hybrids, it's all there. Amazing, right? It's as if every ancient culture is remembering the same terrifying chapter of early human history, but just telling it in different languages. Now, let's talk about who these Watchers really were. There's archaeological evidence out there that seems to support the existence of hybrid creatures, giants, and beings with supernatural traits. But as compelling as it sounds, all of it could be misunderstood or even entirely wrong. However, there's one thing we know for certain. This era, the time stretching from the father of Prophet Idris to Prophet Noah, was when idolatry first appeared. People began crafting statues and slowly started worshipping them. It was the beginning of shirk, the one sin Allah has declared He will never forgive if a person dies upon it. Now remember, what did Satan say when Allah cursed him? He said, "Grant me respite until the day they are resurrected." Allah said, "You are among those who have been given respite." Then he said, Because you have led me astray, I will surely lie in wait for them on your straight path. Then I will come to them from in front of them, from behind them, from their right and from their left, and you will not find most of them grateful. From that moment, Satan made a vow to mislead humanity at every step, and he knew the most powerful way to do that was through the one sin that cuts the soul off from its creator, shirk. Since the day Iblis was cast down to earth, his mission has been to mimic the power and authority of Allah. Allah's throne is above the waters, so Iblis built his own false throne on the ocean, trying to imitate the divine. He formed a kingdom, complete with his own army of devils, each assigned tasks to deceive, corrupt, and ruin human souls. But most of all, Iblis wants to be worshipped. Because once a person falls into worshipping anyone or anything other than Allah, even indirectly, Satan wins. So while we've been talking about the Watchers and their hybrid offspring, don't forget the bigger picture. It was Satan who sparked idol worship in the first place. He planted the idea. He encouraged it. And from that, all forms of spiritual corruption began to spread. It is reported by Imam al-Bukhari, on the authority of Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, while commenting on the verse, and they said, "Do not forsake your gods, and do not forsake Wad, nor Suwa, nor Yaguth, Ya'uq, and Nasr." Ibn Abbas explained, "These were the names of righteous men from among the people. When they died, Shaitan whispered to their people to build statues of them in the places where they used to sit, and to name the statues after them. The people did so, but at that time, they were not worshipped. It wasn't until that generation passed away and the next generation came that the statues began to be worshipped." He further mentioned that these very idols were later adopted and worshipped by the Arabs in the pre-Islamic era. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim also reported an account tied to the origins of idol worship. He said, "People once mentioned Yazid ibn al-Muhallab in the presence of Imam Abu Jafar al-Baqir while he was praying. When he finished his prayer, he said to them, 'You mentioned Yazid ibn al-Muhallab. He was killed in the very land where idol worship first began.' Then he began to tell the story of Wad. Wad was a righteous and beloved man among his people. When he died, the grief of his followers was overwhelming. They gathered around his grave in Babylon, heartbroken at the loss of someone they deeply loved. Seeing this, Iblis took the opportunity. He appeared to them in the form of a man and said, 'I see how much you grieve over the death of this man. Would you like me to make a statue of him so that you can place it where you gather and remember him always?' The people agreed. So Iblis carved a statue in Wad's likeness, and they placed it in their central gathering place as a symbol of remembrance. Later, Iblis returned with another idea. 'Would you like me to make smaller statues for each of your homes so you can remember him wherever you are?' Again, the people agreed. And so statues of Wad were placed in every household. At first, these statues were just symbols of respect, but over time, a new generation arose, one that had not known Wad personally and didn't understand the original intent behind the statues. All they saw was that their forefathers used to honor these figures, so they began to take them as gods. This is how Wad became the first being to be worshipped, besides Allah. From this point, each tribe and people began to create their own idols. And this is exactly what Iblis wanted. Why did I share all these narrations with you? Because they hold the key to understanding the true identity and nature of the Watchers. These so-called Watchers were the ones who first taught humanity various types of knowledge, not for good, but to corrupt. They introduced people to the art of music meant to seduce the soul, to the crafting of metals into jewelry for vanity, and most importantly, to the carving of stone idols, the very foundation of idol worship. And remember the famous narration from the Book of Enoch. It speaks of 200 beings, and one of the most prominent among them was Azazel. Now here's the important part. In Islamic tradition, Azazel was the original name of Iblis before he was cursed and cast out of Allah's mercy. So, if Azazel led the Watchers and Azazel is Iblis, then we are talking about a direct demonic mission to corrupt humanity from the very beginning. It gets even more telling. According to the Sogdian tale of the giants, the Watchers were shapeshifters, able to take on different forms. This lines up with several authentic hadiths from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which confirm that some devils can change their shapes, and Iblis is one of them. So those so-called gods, or Anunnaki or Watchers, weren't gods at all. They were demons in disguise, shape-shifting to blend in with humans, particularly to seduce the daughters of Kabil. Their beauty attracted these beings, and from that union, widespread corruption and hybrid offspring emerged: giants, tyrants, and monsters. And here's the most devastating part. Those very demons made statues of themselves, and humans began to worship them. We see this clearly in the Sumerian tablets, where people offered prayers to the Anunnaki, to Apkallu, to Gilgamesh, and other so-called divine figures. These beings resembled the Watchers, and the Watchers, as we now understand, were none other than the devils. This idol worship became the seed of entire false religions, religions that existed throughout history and even survive in some forms today. Now remember what we discussed in the chapter about the Testament of Solomon. It tells how Prophet Solomon, peace be upon him, by the permission of Allah, captured 72 jinn. Among them was a jinn named Beelzebub, also known as Baal, a prince of demons. He confessed that he had been one of the original 200 Watchers. Solomon also captured other devils who claimed to be the sons of Watchers and mortal women. All of this lines up perfectly. The story of the 200 Watchers in the Book of Enoch, the tales in ancient Mesopotamian texts, the narrations from early Islamic scholars, the Testament of Solomon, they all point to one truth. The Watchers were not angels. They were demons. Their leader was none other than Iblis, and their mission was to flood the earth with corruption, by knowledge, by magic, by mixing bloodlines, and by turning mankind away from their creator. Now let me share with you something truly fascinating. Every idol that exists in the world today traces back to the same 360 idols that were once placed inside the Kaaba. Yes, the very Kaaba in Makkah. And when Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, conquered Makkah, he personally destroyed every single one of them. But that wasn't the first time these idols were shattered. Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, also destroyed those very same idols during his time. And astonishingly, these same idols go even further back, to the earliest days of idol worship, starting from the era between Prophet Idris and Prophet Nuh, peace be upon them. That means the idols people worship today are not new. They are the exact same demonic figures that humanity was first deceived into honoring. Statues created by the devils themselves to replace the worship of Allah. People who bow to them, pray to them, or offer sacrifices to them. They are unknowingly worshiping the very demons who first led mankind astray. And yes, it's heartbreaking. The scars these devils left thousands of years ago still exist today. They've become wrapped in culture, tradition, and even religion, but at their core they remain what they always were: tools of Iblis. There's no need to name specific religions. I trust you're wise enough to connect the dots yourself. That time in history, between Idris and Nuh, was one of the darkest periods humanity has ever known. It was a time of terror. Demons walked among humans, giants roamed the earth, hybrid beasts served the so-called gods, and people worshipped those very devils as divine beings. Honestly, I used to wonder, What kind of people were they that even after 900 years of preaching, only a handful responded to Prophet Nuh's "peace be upon him" call? But now I understand. The evil had sunk its roots deep into their hearts and society. They weren't just misled. They were living among creatures performing unnatural feats, shape-shifting beings, giants with strength beyond human limits, and devils with knowledge of astrology, biology, dark magic, and forbidden sciences. What they saw seemed like miracles, and it blinded them. That is why the Great Flood wasn't just a punishment. It was a cleansing, a reset. In the next video, inshallah, we'll discuss how Prophet Nuh, peace be upon him, built his ark, how the command was given, and where exactly the water of the flood came from.